Welcome to the Clock Tips Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Richardson. Thanks for joining us. In this series, I want to speak about the different types of research projects that I've worked on. And why I want to speak about them is that I want to make science more accessible as far as just understanding what different scientists are doing in order to help us understand our world better. I'll talk first in a series about what I call the fragmented day-night cycle studies that I've been working on for a few years. And I'll just talk about how I started them and what some main findings are and why I think they're applicable to human life potentially, of course, with more studies and so forth. I'm really concerned about how parents and shift workers experience the world. And I select these two groups not because they're the only ones, but I think they're quite notable in the types of people who might experience what I'm about to say, which is a very irregular exposure to light and dark throughout the 24-hour cycle, as well as fragmented sleep, probably because maybe they're napping and just up at different times of the night and or day and just trying to get enough sleep probably, or not enough sleep at all, really. Some years ago, I developed a paradigm to study in the lab with my mice called the fragmented day-night cycle. And this was meant to mimic the types of environments that people who are, working different shifts or new parents or people taking care of the elderly might experience. So it has different amounts of light and dark. So there are 2 hours of dark followed by 4 hours of light alternating. So just think about it as during the night you have light exposure and during the day you have dark exposure. Irregular, right? So the first study I did was to just look at circadian rhythms in mice. And for those who don't know, mice are used as a model for humans because there are a lot of similarities in how the brain reacts to the environment and behaves. So they're used as what's called a model organism. So they have similar circadian rhythms and responses like we do. I put mice on wheels because this is how we can see when they're active, which is relevant because sometimes we're active, sometimes we're sleeping. And that can help us to understand how our circadian rhythms are telling our body to do different activities. So when I did this with mice in this fragmented day-night cycle, I saw that their rhythm was different than the normal 24-hour rhythm. So their rhythm was tracking longer than 24 hours. This means every day or every night for mice, when they started their activity, it would be later and later and later and later. And this is known as a lengthened rhythm. They had a rhythm, but it wasn't the normal rhythm anymore. So this fragmented environment with the light and the dark messed up their circadian rhythm and made it a different length, or period as we call it. Another thing I looked at was their anxiety. I thought about how people who may be just, in different messed up environments, not sleeping at the right time and active all types of hours, maybe their mood is not so great. Some people call that being cranky. And so for mice, we can look at their anxiety levels by putting them in an open box, which we call an open field. And if mice are anxious, they tend to go in the corners a lot and hide away. And if they're not, they will go and explore and look around. But there's a certain level of cautious anxiety mice have anyways in order to protect themselves. Now, what I found in this part was pretty surprising because the mice, instead of being anxious, they actually spent a lot of time in the middle of this field, which would actually be dangerous for them in real life. Instead of being anxious, we termed this as being risky. They were taking this high risk of being in the open area and, quite frankly, making poor decisions about what might be safe for them. So this was another effect of just being in this fragmented environment where the light and dark was at the wrong time of the day. So there's one more thing that occurred in these animals, which is that they experienced something known as anhedonia. And anhedonia is a fancy word to say lack of pleasure seeking. So we gave them water and sugar water, like sweet water and regular water, and a choice between the two. And we wanted to see, happy mice tend to pick the sugar water, just like people would want to pick a treat. But our mice that were exposed to the fragmented day-night cycle, they didn't care for the sugar water over regular water. So they didn't have a preference for something that typically makes mice pretty happy. We termed this as, they had this anhedonia behavior. In summary, the fragmented day-night cycle caused mice to have a different type of period for their circadian rhythm, meaning it was longer than 24 hours, so it was irregular. They had lowered anxiety, which we can say is a form of risky behavior. And then they also had this anhedonia. They didn't want to seek pleasure or do things that would make them happy. The study was done in mice. So in humans, we don't know exactly what this looks like, but I would certainly assume from observations that yes, people have different changes to their mood. Whether it is exactly anhedonia or risky behavior or not is to be determined. But circadian rhythms are certainly disrupted when we have light and dark exposure at the wrong time of the day-night cycle. The name of this article that I spoke about today is called "The Fragmented Day-Night Cycle Induces Period Lengthening, Lowered Anxiety, and Anhedonia in Male Mice." Thanks for joining us today. Please visit our website at clocktips.com for more information about this podcast, how to join our ongoing research study, and more resources to help you improve your time intuition, sleep, and productivity. If you found this information helpful or interesting, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with others and join the discussion on our social media platforms under the handle @myclocktips. Until next time, take care of yourself.